1 year, we were able to pass like $1 million of pipeline over to our sales team. And so I think it's then saying the support team doesn't just solve issues and unblock revenue, you actually pass pipeline as well.
Hello everyone and welcome to Customer-Led Growth, a series where we talk to the best CX and product leaders out there to discuss how they work with their customers, for their customers, with their customers, to build best-in-class products and services. Today I have a very special guest, the great and powerful Lauren, who helped scale up the support operations team at Loom from 12 employees to all the way to $1 billion acquisition by Atlassian over her 7 years there. I had a chance to work with Lauren for several years, luckily, because she was an enterprise customer and I've always thought the world of her. So Lauren, thank you for doing this.
No, thank you. Very kind introduction and happy to be here. Always been a big fan of what Varun and his team is doing at Interpret, and I think we connected early on many years ago just about like the power support teams can provide to products. So I know we're always aligned on that from the start, and it's cool to see how your journey and business has grown as well.
Thank you so much. It's you were thinking about using AI in support for analysis and action well before the ChatGPT moment had happened. So obviously, been a big fan of that. Cool. Right. So Lauren, so to get right into it, you joined Loom when there were like 11 people at the company, and you're employee number 12. This idea was like video comms, asynchronous collaboration. What were some of the most surprising insights in like scaling the support and services org and just like company scaling over that 7-year journey?
If I think back to early days at Loom, where we had matter of thousands of users, now to having sort of 35 million, I think really the fundamentals of what the customer wants doesn't change, but how you serve them has changed significantly. And I'd say what's surprising is it has gotten much more complex over the years, especially now joining, such a powerhouse that is Atlassian as well. But I think if I go back to our founder, Joe, he would always say from day one, like build for 10x. And so I think we've always had that mindset early on, is when we're at 1 million ARR, we were planning for 10 million ARR. When we're at 10 million ARR, we're planning for 100 million. Now we've surpassed that, we're planning for, an ambitious number of $1 billion. So I think it's that mindset of your customer needs don't change, but the complexity behind it does change. And so it's just keeping pace with that has been the, I think, fun operational challenge through it all. Well said. But I'm curious, would love to know the story of the evolution of feedback loops and the different chapters of that as like the product evolved from like thousands of users to millions of users and found this incredible PMF. I will always say the best support experience is to never contact support. And that's sort of been our mantra since day one. And I think a big part of that is feeding back what you learn into the product. And so from a scale perspective, I think how I think about it is sort of 3 ways. You need to have the culture set up around it. You need to have your rituals set up. And then you need to have your systems and your tooling, which is where products like Interpret come in. But I think speaking about the rituals first, so very early on, support drove the idea of a voice of the customer. Our CPO, or our VP of product at the time, used to call it her monthly truth serum. And she was just like, hit me, I want to know the good, the bad, and there was a lot of, bad is not the right word, but there was a lot of frustrated users, but product was so open to hear it. So I think it was building that culture early on, building the rituals and making it a 2-way street. So making sure, I think like when we hand over our voice to the customer every month, there is also a column for accountability where product has to say accepted, rejected, planned, implemented. And I think it makes it more of that. It's not just support sort of spraying feedback to product. It's product also, committing or speaking the same language. And I think maybe speaking more about the cultural side of it, I think, as I said earlier, like the most value a support team can add to the business is latching onto those insights and feeding them back. And I think it's getting support involved early on to actually understand and be like acting like business owners and speaking the same language and understanding why something isn't being implemented.
Yep. Yeah.
And then I think the third thing, and you know what sort of underpins it all, is the systems.
Yep.
And so, as we mentioned at the start, we connected very early on, and I didn't know Loom was, you know, one of the first customers, if not the first customer of Interpret, and having all your feedback coming through one platform is critical. But I think the most important thing is having it all connected to your back end and having revenue and all of your customer data behind it as well. You know, you can say to a product team, hey, we've got 100 tickets or 10 tickets, but actually showing the revenue number attached to that is really where the value comes and where you make change in the business. So I'd say they're like the fundamentals that we've kept from when we were small and now doing it on a bigger scale where we're spread across, you know, my previous support team is now spread across like 7 departments now. But I think it's like, how can we still hold on to the essence of that is sort of what we're trying to do now in a much bigger scale in Atlassian.
Yeah, I love the three big pillars of culture, rituals, and systems, and I think all three are equally important. And even if one of them missing, like it just like the product feedback loops like never quite like hit the mark. One of the things like I remember from working with you was like the amount of like pipeline and revenue generated by the support team. I would love to hear your thoughts on like how did that happen? Like how did like support driving upsells basically and revenue and pipeline, how did that happen?
When we gave feedback and when support made impactful changes, we would then link it back to this feedback we provided actually meant that, you know, 200,000 more videos were recorded per week. And then that obviously has a direct impact on the business that you can say came from support. So I think that was one of them. But I also think another thing is, I always think about for example, we've made a business decision to support free customers at Loom.
Right.
And that's because video is a new behavior, Loom is a new behavior, and it's important to us to support free. When we joined Atlassian, that came under a lot of scrutiny. Like, that's very costly, why are you doing that? And I think what was helpful is I had the data to say all of our free customers that we support, you know, to use some sort of, you know, high level numbers, maybe like under 10% of free customers ever go on to convert to paid. But of the ones that contact support, it was about 65% go on to pay.
Wow.
So it was very easy to show, well, by supporting them and by investing this money and maybe the support costs this, we can actually turn this into revenue. So I think that was another way that we just showed the return on investment. And one year we were able to pass like $1 million of pipeline over to our sales team. And so I think it's then saying, the support team doesn't just solve issues and unblock revenue, we actually pass pipeline as well. You know, we're in an economic time where budgets are getting cut, and so it's more important than ever to tie your teams to these things. Yeah,
well said. I agree with all of it. Like you saw the journey of like Loom as a very young startup with, you know, 12 employees and only 1,000 odd users to, you know, 35 million users, the acquisition by Atlassian. And what was that transition like? Any like lessons from like more broadly like adapting holistically to like a larger enterprise? I would love to hear some of the lessons learned over the last year and a half.
Yeah, I think a lot of lessons. I think a lot of things we did well, and a lot of things maybe we could have done better. And I think, you know, in any acquisition, you've got to make a lot of trade-offs. And one of the challenges was the previous Loom support team, the responsibilities that we owned when it came to serving customers at Atlassian is owned by sort of, you know, 7, 8 departments. But how do we make sure our customer, like a customer doesn't care about your organizational structure. And a customer should never have to care about your organizational structure. So I think that's what we kept coming back to was, how do we not push our org structure, our new very complex org structure, onto the customer, and how do they still maintain a seamless experience? So I think that was one of the lessons, was like always coming back to, is this just better for us or is this better for the customer? And we made a lot of decisions that way. And I think some advice I got early on was, you know, you're not going to win, like, you know, you have to choose the hills you die on. And they were definitely the hills that I would die on every time, was like, this is not better for the customer, therefore we shouldn't roll it out. We're just doing it for the sake of standardization, and yet our customer is not benefiting. So I think it was always coming back to that, which still is been like a really helpful framework.
Yeah, I think it's a great framework. And I like love the example of like, you know, the customer doesn't care about your org structure and like where that's like they have a question. You know, you signed up with us like well before ChatGPT happened, like 18 months before even ChatGPT happened. And as you think about like AI and where it's headed, like how do you see like maybe 3 years down the road, what would it mean for a PLG company to serve their customers? Like what will be different?
How I think about it is, the generic answer of, we know this, every company has a chatbot or similar, so all of the known issues, 80% of support should be going through AI.
Yeah.
But what that does, the 20% is elevates it. And I think the thing I haven't seen companies nailing yet, and we are working on it, but I think there's a lot of opportunity here, is more agentic support. And so actually agents who can take actions on behalf of the customer.
Right.
And also proactive support.
Yeah.
And so there's really no reason now that if you have an issue that you need to, find out how to contact support, write in a ticket, download your logs, attach your logs, record a video of it. Like, you just shouldn't have to do that anymore. Right. And then I think the other thing is how support teams sit in the business. So it is going to change. So a support department won't necessarily be a support department. I think it'll be more of a customer engineering function in the coming years. And we spoke earlier at Loom, our support team actually sat under the product function, which is an intentional decision.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, support teams or customer engineering teams, they are the ones that are accountable for when the product fails.
Yeah.
A ChatGPT isn't going to get on a Zoom call at 2 a.m. if a deploy fails, but a support team still will.
Cool. I guess like a couple of like fun tangent questions. One, how did it feel like to, I know you're originally from Australia and now you're living in London. We're here in beautiful Mount Street Gardens in Mayfair. But you saw the OG PLG company in the world, one of the great software companies, Atlassian. Like how did you reflect on the journey basically if you join a very small startup and then like it led to like an amazing outcome at Atlassian, you're part of Atlassian. Like how did that feel to you personally?
Yeah, did not expect when I joined this little tiny startup called Loom from my apartment that was on a main road in central Lisbon to be ending up, we were, I think, 12 employees when I joined. We got acquired at about 170. And then, the next day you have a new email address and you're part of a 15,000 person company was definitely not what I expected. I think as well, I had never almost heard an Australian accent on a Zoom call. And then one day it's day one and we're in a introduction meeting with Mike Cannon-Brooks, and I was thinking, oh, is that what I sound like?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that in 7 years, but oh. Yeah. So yeah, it was a big, it was a huge change, but I think Atlassian is a great place for Loom, and I think the values align and the product fit makes sense, and I think we've already seen incredible growth. I think Loom is already sort of 20% ahead of expectations from a growth perspective, and still growing sort of around 50% year on year. So I would say the startup energy is still there, and now it's just making sure video messaging is available to bigger customers.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Outside of Loom, or maybe even outside of tech, as a customer, what are some of your favorite brands from a customer experience perspective?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think as a bit of a support operations nerd, I always find it amazing when airlines get things right. And so I actually had off the top of my head, I had a really good experience with EasyJet, which is one of the low-cost providers in, I guess they're based out of the UK, the other day, where, I'd spelled my name wrong on the ticket and I wrote into their chat, they handed the chatbot off straight to a human and the human resolved it. And eventually that probably will be something quite automated, but I just thought it elevated my perception of the company straight away by thinking you are a low-cost provider. Yeah. And despite all the complexity you're dealing with, flying people around the world, you've still, and this is something that they're meant to charge you $70 or $80 to change your name on a ticket, but it was a very intentional flow to make sure I was served, and the handoff was about 5 seconds to the human, and then the human solved it within not even a minute. So that just truly was elevated my whole perception of what I think, people can have interesting relationships with low-cost airlines despite the amazing thing that they fly us all around the world, we still find the need to complain that, the toasted sandwiches aren't good or something.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was like a very impressive operational flow. So I think that's a very tactical example. And yeah.
First of all, great job, EasyJet, and never thought I'll hear a support.
Never thought
I'll hear like the airlines mentioned as like a customer centric, but that's pretty awesome to hear.
Maybe it's a low expectation thing as well.
Yeah, but like this, I mean, from what you described, it sounds good. Like they did a really good job. Like that's
I know.
great.
I would
That's amazing.
almost
Yeah.
prioritize to fly with them again.
Yeah, see, yeah.
I think when you know how it sounds so simple, but when you know how complex those things are behind the scenes,
Right.
someone gets it right. You just like, well done.
Yeah, you appreciate it even more. That's great.
Well done.
Lauren, thank you for doing this. It's
Thank
been a
you.
pleasure.
It's been great.
Thank you for working with us for the last several years. It's been amazing, an honor to work with you and learn from you. And thank you again for doing this.
Thank you.